Hey, what's happening, family? It's your man, Mark Black. Happy hump day to all of you. By the way, before we even get into it, I want to say I'm sorry and I'm glad I was able to go ahead and get that out to you, Michi. Michi was the winner of the monthly drawing during my Sucker Free Saturday broadcast. As you know, fam, every at the end of the month, for every Sucker Free Saturday broadcast, we have a drawing for 25 bucks, right? And Michi was the lucky winner. So, Michi, I got that out to you, and thank you for your patience. I really do appreciate it. Um, Family, Afro Troop in the house, Miss Denny in the house, Unsunken One. If you're here watching, go ahead and let us know you're here so we can give you some love. This one, family, I'm gonna make it tight, but I'm gonna make it right. All right. Um, because I've been thinking a lot lately about a lot of the stuff that we see going on politically, economically, socially, you name it, culturally, as ADOS people. And I wonder if we realize a really uncomfortable truth that I plan to discuss with us today. That uncomfortable truth, family, is simply this: you doing you is killing us. That's right. I said it. You doing you is killing us. Now, what do I mean by this, fam? Right? Because, I mean, you have the right to your life. That's part of being an American, is to live your life by your own lights, right? As you see fit. Long as you're not hurting nobody else, you can pretty much live, think, act, feel, worship, follow, believe what you want. All right? So why am I saying that you doing you is killing us? Because if you see, family, you take a look at how many of us ADOS folk are operating in the various spheres of human activity. And the one thing you see overwhelmingly is this hyper individualistic, aspirational ethos that permeates everything we do. And I do mean everything, right? It is almost as if ADOS folk have embraced the idea of screw you, I got mine, right? Even if they don't have it, right? Even with all the data that suggests that even the top 5% amongst us barely touches the lower middle for the dominant ethnic group in this country, for white folks, right? Never mind any of the data, the real information out there that suggests the true reality of ADOS existence. Shout out to you, Joan, by the way. Welcome to the broadcast, sister, and happy hump day to you. Regardless of the data, it seems as if we are dead set, intent on living as individuals. Now, the reason why this isn't necessarily a bad thing for the rest of America is because as our fellow Americans have the lion's share of wealth and political access and influence over the culture, over the society, they have the luxury to maneuver as if their own individual mental states, economic states, and so on and so forth is the only thing that matters, right? As an American who can experience the fullest expression of your Americanness, your American citizenship, you have the luxury, the privilege of embracing an ethos that literally means you could spend your entire life doing whatever it is that you want to do and not really, in the main, have to consider anyone else. One of the things that I've heard very often from liberal white folks that I know, when I present them with the information about the reality of ADOS existence in this country, is they say, I swear to you, I had no clue. Now, I used to ascribe malice. I used to say, how the fuck, pardon my language, I'm trying to control my cursing. How in the world do you not know what's going on in your country? What's happening to an entire subset of the populace? What has been happening to this group for nearly, well, at this year, be 400 years. Then I realized something. It's not malice. They literally don't have to know. They have so much privilege as citizens in the United States that they can literally walk through their entire lives completely oblivious to anything that isn't them individually or maybe their families as an extension of their individual selves. quite often when a lot of these people who aren't studious, who aren't intellectually rigorous, tell you they didn't know what was happening to black folk, they're telling the truth, unfortunately. They have the luxury of being able to act as if everything in their world only is about them. But ADOS, we have never had that. We have never truly had that privilege. That is a part of our fullest expression of citizenship that we have been denied at every turn. We, whether we think we are, whether we feel like we are treated as a collective. We are the collective garbage eaters of the United States of America. We are the ones set up to be the permanent underclass, the permanent outcast, the ones to eat the failure. Dave, you can't hear me, brother. I can see the levels on the mic and everything, so you may have to make some adjustments on your side. And anybody else, everybody else, let me know if you can hear me or not. But because of that, regardless of our desire, our individual desire to live a life free from the burdens of being the American descendants of slavery, we have never successfully, whether individually or collectively, been able to escape that. All your desires to live as your fellow Americans do don't matter. All the putting your nose to the grindstone, making all the efforts you can to be as respectable, to speak with erudition, with clarity, to dress well, to smell well, to work in the right positions, to acquire the right educational attainments, and so on and so forth. None of that has ever meant a thing for you. Our brother Malcolm Al-Malik Al-Shabazz, may he rest, once asked someone a question. He said, "What does America call a black man with a PhD?" He said, "They call him a nigga is what they call him." We have seen story after story after story of people, ADOS people, who seem to have lived the Horatio Alger story. For those of you who are unfamiliar, Horatio Alger is a character in a series of books written around the turn of the 20th century who basically started off as a nobody, right, as a nothing, but became a success, living the American dream. We see people like Lil Wayne express that he's never experienced racism a day in his life in America. And we as ADOS folk look at people like him and say, how in the hell is that possible? How can you not have experienced it? How can you not have seen it? But in point of fact, Lil Wayne has had access to resources, wealth that many of us will never have access to. And thus, to an extent, has had a sheltered existence because of that. So when this fool speaks and says that there's no such thing as racism, he's telling the truth as he sees it. He doesn't extrapolate that he acts a caricature of ADOS life. But when he looks out at his audience in his shows, all the faces are white. The RZA gets in an interview in front of the white folks. Now, I heard it once said, if you want to know what a black person, an ADOS person, really thinks, ask them in front of white folks. Because you'll hear the truth. RZA talks about us being properly dressed and properly refined. Never even thinking about the fact that he and a whole group of other ADOS and first, second generation immigrant pardon my language, folk made millions off of portraying ghetto caricatures of ADOS folk. They even had a clothing line imitating some of urban fashions that were popular and popularized by young ADOS people. But when he was able to experience that soothing balm of white acceptance, all bets were off. Remember, screw you. He got his. We have individuals like this Talib Kweli character who comes from such an extremely rarefied, privileged background that it would be nearly impossible for me to overstate the level of privilege that this person comes from, that Talib Kweli comes from. Professional mother and father, intact, stable, two-parent home. Brother who's a professional. He himself who has been college educated. Rarefied air this man exists in. And he makes his money, again, in a primarily ADOS art form, popularizing ADOS thought, and in some cases even playing a caricature of ADOS. But when it comes time for us to reach out to Talib Kweli for his support for our justice claim, we are told that we are trash. That our advocates and proponents he would like to see destroyed in every way possible. Family, it is a sad but uncomfortable, real, hard, cold truth that to the extent that you and I buy into the idea of doing us, we are literally making it possible for all of us to die. Doing you is killing us. It ain't working. Now, I have given this a lot of thought, family, a lot of thought. Why is it that it seems that the hardest people to convince of the rightness of this transformational moment, of the value in pressing for this justice claim, why is it the hardest ones to convince are other ADOS folk? Shout out to Made and Dade, by the way, and producer. Melcor too as well. Welcome to the broadcast and happy hump day. Why is it? Why is it that we are having to struggle so hard to convince our fellow tribes people to advocate in their own best interests? Well, Family, today, I would like to offer some answers that I discovered along the way. Part of why it is that it is so difficult. Thank you, Crumble Me. And part of the reason why it's so difficult to convince other ADOS people is because of another uncomfortable truth that I'm about to share with you. America can't hurt me without you. That's right. I said it. America can't truly get to me without you. Don't believe me? Let's take a look at history, shall we? When we go back and look at the plantations, what we see on the plantation is not so much white folks doing anything to us, really. Whenever there is an assignment of work that is done, who is it that we heard it from on the plantations but another face that looks like us? When it was time for the lash, you think the master was going to get up off of his porch drinking mint juleps to go out there and beat on dusty ass stinky slaves? No. They had one of us do it. When you look at criminal activity amongst ADOS folk, we tend to primarily prey upon each other criminally, right? We steal each other's goods. We defraud each other. We assault each other. And in some cases, even murder each other, right? Now, this doesn't set us aside from everybody else. Our country is so segregated that, of course, it's more likely that you're going to be preyed upon by another ADOS individual than an individual of another ethnicity. But the fact is that we have often seen in the United States, in our experience in the United States, as the descendants of slavery, that when harm truly comes to us, it usually comes from a face that looks like ours. I can even bring it up to the modern day. Who in modern day time has done more to cause harm to ADOS folk than Barack Hussein Obama? Look like us, talk like us, try to preach like us when he go and give us those virtue signaling morality messages every year or so. Man had his hands on the reins of government, the chief executive. You know, in terms of the mafia, he was the capo di tutti capo. And what did he do? What did he do at all, ever, to try and benefit ADOS folk? We saw a reduction in benefits that many ADOS people need to live. SBA loans were lower to black folk, ADOS folk, under Barack Obama's administration than it was under under Shrub, you know, Mr. Bushisms himself. Look at the congressional black caucuses today. You had Clyburn, and I finally remembered his name. You had Clyburn go on CNN and carry water for Jim Crow Joe Biden to try to fob off the bill that Joe Biden actually put his name on as the writer, the author of the bill, tried to put the onus of all the bad stuff in the bill on the Republicans and take credit for all the good stuff, such as it was. Meanwhile, when we go back and look at who voted for it, we find a very interesting thing. The bill passed during a time when there was a Democratic president, William Jefferson Clinton, and a Democratic House and a Democratic Senate. Yes, they had control of both houses of Congress and the White House. They may have needed a few Republicans, but not many. They passed all of that. How many of you are unfortunate enough to have had family who have suffered due to 3 strikes? Or who has had their homes kicked in under false pretenses in police, in military gear, due to the 1099 program that allowed the United States military to send and sell and give surplus military equipment to police jurisdictions? Or how many of you have lost your homes, your livelihoods, and so on and so forth due to the expansion of civil forfeiture, which was a direct result of the Biden law? But James Clyburn got his, right? Screw you, I got mine. If Missy Pelosi say this is a good thing, then it's a good thing. Why y'all fighting so hard? Another face look just like us, doing us dirt. Because of this, we ADOS folk have a unique response to collective issues. When there were the terrorist attacks in London, the whole world united around the UK. British folk, Welsh folk, Scottish folk, Northern Ireland folk, people from the Commonwealths, all put their personal animus aside to stand with the nation. People who, prior to the incident, were on TV at each other's throats were all of a sudden clasping hands in brother and sisterhood. In Paris, when they had the terrorist attacks in Paris, if you looked across social media, across Twitter, across Facebook, you saw all these people changing their profile pictures to the French flag and tweeting Je suis Paris and uniting around the horrors that were experienced on the streets of Paris. But when ADOS folk experience tragedy, rather than it driving us to each other, causing us to cleave closer to each other, to lift each other up, it atomizes us. Now, I would like to say it would be easier if I was just addressing ADOS folk. But as far as I'm able to tell, this exists all across the so-called African diaspora. The one thing that we all have in common as so-called diasporan Africans is that we're all descendants of the former slaves. So there had to have been something that occurred during slavery that has warped, perverted, if you will, our normal collective response to collective trauma. Whereas other people experience a trauma and it brings them together in collective efforts and collective goals, right? The so-called Jews experienced the Holocaust under the Nazi regime in Poland and Austria and Germany and France and so on and so forth. And they're still cleaving together over that to this day. We are the living evidence of one of the greatest crimes against humanity that has ever been committed in memory. But we can't even agree to identify ourselves as the descendants of our ancestors. Am I the only one that wonders why that is? Am I the only one that sees that and questions how in the hell did something like that come to be so embedded so deeply in the ADOS psyche that even the worst, most horrible traumas we can face as a people just has us shrugging our shoulders and going, man, damn, that's messed up what happened to them niggas. I did a video on my old Mark Black channel. Now, for those of you who are not familiar with me previously, you should know that I used to be an avid Pan-Africanist or Pan-Blackist. I'm not as avid of a Pan-Africanist or Pan-Blackist anymore. That being said, this video that I'm going to show you briefly here details a truth that I think we all need to understand so that we can start to work on those things that prevent us from doing what every other people do as a matter of course. And then after the video, I'll talk about it a little bit more, then I'm going to open up the phone lines and I'm going to let you talk. I want to hear what you all got to say. Before I jump on that video, let me read some of these comments. Afro Troop said, butter biscuit surely is good. It must be. For as much water and wood as he was carrying for Biden, must be. And Sucker One said, my sellout ex-mother-in-law was on the bandwagon. The very type of coonery got her in the vice president office with her company. Yeah, I hear you. Right? Screw you, Unsunken One. I got mine. Right? We still live under the pretense we can play this hyper-individualistic, hyper-capitalist game to some degree of success with all the evidence that suggests otherwise. With that, family, let's go check out this film real quick. It's a very short video, only about 12, maybe 13 minutes long. So please be patient and watch closely. Peace to my nephew Dave, by the way. Yeah, they do love them butter biscuits, nephew. They love them. Here we go, family. By the way, let me know if you can hear the audio from the video. Pop a 1 in the chat for me.
What's up, family? It's your man, Mark Black. I want to discuss with you what the reasons are why so many of us have no problem supporting these people, but we find ourselves balking at supporting or publicizing these. I also want to discuss what are the reasons why our oppressors have no problem with lifting up certain people as heroes, even if we may find their actions to be disturbing and repugnant. and why too many of us categorically reject the notion of seeing these African people as heroes of our own. As usual, many of our pathological behaviors stem from the traumatic experiences we've collectively faced as a people, beginning here in the wilds of the West with our enslavement. Now, this video will not be an exhaustive treatise about our enslavement, as this isn't a documentary, but we do need to discuss some key ideas and actions to help guide us on the path. The first thing we need to understand is that slaves aren't born. They are made over and over again. Slavery is a physical condition. However, enslavement is primarily a mental and emotional process. All of the physical trauma we've experienced and continue to experience here in the diaspora is by design. These atrocious acts are done in order to instill the psychological framework necessary for us to accept and help to maintain our enslavement. Because of this, our enslavement was one of the greatest atrocities committed against all of humanity. To get to the root of why we react differently to our emotional and mental anguish than any other ethnic group, we have to discuss exactly what was done to us and why. When we first arrived here on the shores of the West, we were from different tribes, nations, and cultures. We were Mende, Fulani, and Igbo. Being thrust together in the hellish fires of slavery, we began to do what any group of human beings would do. We began to come together in common unity, organize, and most importantly, we began to resist the oppression of the Pale people. Of course, the Pale people were not going to take our resistance lying down, and thus began the series of physical and psychological processes that were instituted to not only enslave us, but to systematically maintain our submission and degradation and their domination. I need to remind all of you at this point that while these things I will discuss were initiated by the Pale people, as of 2016, we are firmly and fully aiding and abetting them in maintaining our own oppression. Don't you worry, I will detail what, why, and how we're doing this. The very first thing to note is that we don't have to act the way we are today. During our American enslavement from the early 1600s through the Civil War, there were consistent revolts, uprisings, and rebellions. This should be common knowledge by now, but it isn't, and there's a specific reason why. If we collectively understood that there were many of our ancestors who not only resisted enslavement, but were willing to go as far as open and bloody combat in order to liberate themselves, it puts the lie to the whole idea that we have to wait for the Pale people to finally wake up and set us free. We would understand clearly that they never had and will never have the full intention of allowing us to be free. We must and should liberate ourselves in every area of people activity. Now let's examine exactly what was done to us and how we are still reflecting the psychological trauma from those experiences. During the enslavement process, we were physically abused. The slavers used horrible physical trauma to damage not just our bodies, but our psyches. Everything from whippings and beatings to rape, both homo and heterosexual, there was no option for instilling fear and terror that was off of the table. I need you all to pay close attention to this next part, as this is one of the most painful traumas we experienced. Oftentimes, instead of the Pale people doing this to us themselves, it's not as if work was their strong suit. They would either encourage or force one of us to perform these heinous acts. The worst part of the abuse was the arbitrary nature of it. This is a well-known psychological torture tactic designed to break your mind and your willingness to resist. On top of the frequent physical traumas we experienced, there was also the psychological trauma of separation and fear of separation. Make no mistake, family, you can heal from even a lengthy series of beatings. Rape victims may find a measure of peace through lengthy therapy and supportive treatments. However, watching your mother, father, brother, sister, uncle, or aunt being sold away, never to be seen again, is a trauma that is so difficult to overcome that many of our ancestors chose to submit to the horrors of slavery rather than lose a single member of their family. Of course, being that such a method wouldn't be effective in traumatizing you if it was never used, even with your utter compliance and submission, it still happened. Now that we've taken a very brief glance at some of the horrors experienced by those who came before us, it becomes imperative to see just where we still carry forward the wounds that never healed, and just how we deal with this pain today. Before we continue, I need to introduce us to a term that encompasses the psychological processes that drive us to act, think, and see ourselves in the world as only a deeply wounded and scarred people can. This term is defense mechanisms. Defense mechanisms are defined as automatic psychological processes that protect the individual against anxiety and from the awareness of internal or external dangers or stressors. There are many different ways for us to react in mental defense when experiencing a painful or uncomfortable reality. Some of these psychological defenses are perfectly good. Courage is a healthy reaction when confronting a danger. Being emotionally self-sufficient is necessary to prevent seeking validation from others who may not be worth looking to for validation. However, there are other reactions that are not just dangerous, but in a poisonous environment such as the nations in which the members of Africa's diaspora live, are just plain deadly. There are 3 defense mechanisms that I want to focus on because they are the ones that affect how we deal with each other. I simply don't have the time in this video to go into all of the various neurotic and pathological defenses we express. Those defenses are displacement, rationalization, and social comparisons. Displacement is a defense mechanism that shifts aggressive impulses to a more acceptable or less threatening target. This one is a really important one to note because it is the one we primarily engage in under the system of whiteism. Remember my mention earlier of the traumas that were inflicted upon us by faces that look like us rather than by their pale dictators? How do you think this would affect us psychologically? We're angry, and rightfully so. However, we're very afraid, there's the internal stressor, of the threat by massa, a definite external danger, if we blame and attack the pale people that ordered our violation. So what do? We simply displace the blame onto the other black person. Yes, we still do this today in 2016. Instead of resolving our psychological pain and suffering in the most truthful, obvious, and only real way available, open conflict with massa, we take our anger and outrage and hatred and focus it on each other. Rationalization occurs when we defend against a painful, traumatic experience by either convincing ourselves that there was no wrong done to us or by using false reasoning to justify what occurred. No matter how obviously abusive, hostile, or downright murderous an act is committed by one of the pale people against us, not far behind the pale people, there will be one of us with an apologia in defense of them. We've become so good at this that even though we know that poverty in many of our countries is caused by the theft of our resources, labor, and efforts, we'll rationalize the murder of one of our people by claiming that they were criminals and this is why they were killed. This is why we say things like, if you would just comply with the police, they won't do anything to you. Or, if you pull your pants up, use proper English, and get a job, pale people would respect you. We all know and deep down have always known that what they do to us is random, arbitrary, and only serves to keep us fearful, subservient, and off balance. I'm only going to say this once, and after this, no more. There is nothing we can do that will prevent the pale people from practicing whiteism except to resist them. If we continue to rationalize and justify what's happening to us, it will continue to happen. If you cannot see this by now, you're probably delusional, as well as suffering from all of the other psychological traumas we all share in. The last defense I want to discuss is probably the one of these that I hate the most. The previous 2 can be overcome relatively easily with some education, courage, and a willingness to be free by any means. This defense, however, is the most insidious and straight up dangerous one of them all. Making social comparisons is a psychological defense that we use to compare ourselves to other individuals or groups that are supposedly worse off than ourselves. This way, we can dissociate ourselves from acknowledging our similarities with them, empathizing with them, and identifying with them. And it works to make us more comfortable with our place under whiteism. This has been the one tool that the pale people have used to great effect. Let's examine how, even in 2016, social comparisons still cause us to divide rather than unify. Under this system of whiteism, the very color of our skins have been used by us to determine the value of human lives. You know the old saying, if you're white, you're all right. If you're brown, sit down. And if you're black, get back. Colorism is a plague and a bane in the existence of Africans all across the diaspora. The very idea that somehow you'll ever be light enough to be considered one of the pale people is an idea that can only exist in the minds of a people who have been so traumatized by the idea of their own blackness that rather than resist, they would willingly see all of us destroyed than to jeopardize their journey toward paleness. It gets worse than this, dear family. The very few of us that are allowed some degree of prosperity in this sick system engage in the fantasy that somehow their money will buy their freedom and safety, like social manumission papers. So they are able to look down on the rest of us and wonder why we all haven't gotten up on their level, instead of seeing the truth of the matter. If you don't believe me, only look at the recent incident with Dr. Dre to remove your doubt. Never doubt that under whiteism, Dre's millions have no power over a pale-skinned devil douchebag who is denied his natural right to park in Dre's driveway. Let's review. By displacing our justified anger, outrage, and hatred onto other black people, consistently rationalizing and justifying the atrocities committed against us on the daily, and using social comparisons in an attempt to distance ourselves from blackness in general and other black people specifically, the poisonous wounds from our distant past are continuing to wreak havoc upon our people, and the pain and suffering many of us feel as a necessary concomitant of seeing the truth of whiteism is not able to draw us together. Like a psychological atomic bomb, it blows us apart and atomizes us. Until we can pray for ourselves as hard as we pray for others, we will not be free. Until we can say, I am black, and identify with not just our families, neighborhoods, or blocks, but with every other black face, both in the motherland and the diaspora, we will never be safe. Until we take the time to develop collectively psychological defenses that work to strengthen our bonds with each other and heal the traumas that continue to drive our actions even today, we are doomed. Make no mistake, family. Whiteism in all of its Hydra-like forms is your common enemy, no matter who, what, and where you are. My pain is yours, and we can and must bear it together. My brothers and sisters, kings and queens, it is long past time that we finish the work our ancestors could not. Again, this is your man Mark Black. Share this video wherever you're able. Like it and subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. Until next time, love, peace, prosperity, and real power to my people.
Family, thank you for taking the time to watch that that little video. Like I said, about 15 minutes. Before I continue with the broadcast, there's just one thing I want to do really quickly. I want to apologize for the use of our beloved sister Corinne's and brother Walter's images in the video. That video was made prior to my commitment to not show the photos, especially photos in bad positions of those we've lost at the hands of extrajudicial police killings and things like that, right? And thank you, producer. Believe it or not, I am not a college educated man. I have some college, but it took me months of research, especially studying various psychological defense mechanisms. I studied and read studies on learned helplessness behavior and so on and so forth, right? Unsucking one said it best, man. Like, even our most privileged ADOS folk understand the reality of this shit. I've been doing really good not cursing. The reality of the matter, right? They understand inherently that regardless of what level they rise to in this society individually, at any given point, even the lowest peon amongst members of the dominant group, the dominant ethnic group in this country, can take their life. I mean, you all remember that situation with Dr. Dre. This dude parked his motorcycle in Dre's driveway like he owned the place. Dr. Dre's a billionaire. That didn't stop him from being surrounded by all of those law enforcement officers we saw there and nearly going to jail. What happened if they thought Dre was a threat? He's got a gun. He's reaching for something. Boom. Right? But see, family, here's the thing. What I've come to understand is that when Sister Yvette talks about the need for ADOS family to have lineage therapy, she's not kidding. She's not kidding. There are accretions that we carry within our culture that stem directly from the days when we were on the plantation. And we still cleave to those same cultural mores now. The constant lack of trust in other ADOS folk, especially if it comes to having anything to do with resources. This is why a young white man can have a dream of starting a YouTube channel and expect that if he provides a good product, whether he's a gamer, whether he's doing videos on alternative history, whether he's a science nut, or whatever the case may be, that support and views are going to roll in. Meanwhile, your average ADOS person has to beg for support on their channels. Right? This is why when we get together and organize the few times that we do, everybody's on board with whatever game plan we all have a say in. Everybody got to have a say. So even the most uneducated, absolutely mentally lazy, intellectually dishonest ideologue amongst us gets to have the same voice, the same weight as the most knowledgeable, studious, analytical individuals amongst us. You have ADOS people who think they can hold a candle in discussing reparations with Dr. William Sanity Darity, a man who has spent the last 40 years of his life, his entire academic career, studying this one thing. This is why you lose so many folk who are ADOS when you start talking about what we may have to give up or what we may have to put in to get what it is that we want. There have been ADOS folk with great ideas on how to combat this system and help us to get what is our due. There have been ADOS people who have tried to start legal defense funds, similar like the ADL, right? The Anti-Defamation League. They'll actually go to court and fight for people who are being defamed, but if they're Jewish, right? We've had black people that have actually, I know because I am one of them, I actually registered, founded, and organized a registered nonprofit legal defense fund for black folk. And I couldn't even pay the next year to renew the charter for the organization. We still hold on to the idea, erroneous as it may be, that real harm, the real pain doesn't come from a white face. The real struggle, the real harm that we face as ADOS folk, we believe truly in our heart of hearts is going to come from a face that looks like this. At one time, maybe those defense mechanisms may have been survival oriented. But in this day and time, with the advent of 2053 rapidly approaching and the demise of anything even possibly resembling an ADOS presence in the United States of America, these psychological defense mechanisms, this learned helplessness behavior that we're expressing is not only maladaptive, it is deadly to us. Because America can't hurt me without you. You doing you sounds so dope, don't it? Planning your trip to Jamaica, or the new nice car you gonna buy next year. Maybe you've been thinking about getting a house in a certain neighborhood and you just got a promotion on your job. I'm not the brother that's here to hate on you. I'm simply here to remind you that you alone is not a threat to the status quo here in America. You by yourself, they don't worry about you. I wouldn't be surprised in the next 20 years if they gave a few more of us an opportunity to taste the rainbow, so to speak, right before 2053 drops the hammer on ADOS folk. I'm a big fan of Game of Thrones, at least I was until this last season. And a huge partisan of House Stark. And I remember Sansa Stark told her sister Arya, she said, when winter comes, the lone wolf dies, but the pack survives. In the words of the immortal and inestimable Gil Scott-Heron, family, it's winter in America, and it has been for at least for us for 400 years. And in winter, the lone ADOS person dies. They're either deflected, shunted off, encouraged to become hewers of wood and drawers of water, but they don't make it. Butter biscuits don't come with a retirement plan. But the pack has a chance to survive if we do the hard psychological, mental, emotional, political, and economic work required. It is as simple as that. You doing you ain't helping us. America can't hurt me, your brother Mark Black, who loves you. America can't hurt me without you. They have always needed your face, your hands, your muscles, your back, your mind to be able to do the real harm to me. You want your due, ADOS family? You want your due? Commit to no longer being the pawn of those who would seek to hurt all of us and use you to do it. Stop being a cat's paw. Stop creating these false divisions based off of the narcissism of small differences. The lone wolf dies, but the pack survives. Peace, Miss Kwame. Welcome to the broadcast and happy hump day to you, sister. By the way, peace to Paula too as well. I didn't greet you on the way in. Afro Troop, the organization is defunct. I had to let it go. So it costs nothing for the charter because I would have to reorganize the organization. It was called Black Legal Assistance Collective, or Black, because you know how Mark Black loves his acronyms, right? And it was a completely legitimate, registered, nonprofit, 501c, tax exempt organization. Oh, happy birthday to you, sister, and many, many more to you. Fam, I'm getting ready to open up the lines. I'm glad to see you, sister. Happy birthday to you. You be safe and enjoy your birthday. Today's your day. I hope you catch this on the re-up, Miss Kwame, because I think you're going to like this one. I hope this one's an adequate birthday gift for you, sister. Family, understand that there is much more to how we operate here in the United States than just our economics. The economics is hugely important. I mean, if you don't believe me, just look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? Your physical needs come first. You need water, food, clothing on your butt. But right after that, you start getting into your emotional and psychological needs. You get into security and protection. But Black folk have been living on Maslow's hierarchy of needs like an apex of a pyramid with no base. Through our aspirational mind crap, right? Through this need for validation of our existence here in America from the dominant society, we've had all our focused on self-actualization. That's at the top of the pyramid. If you was to look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs in the shape of a pyramid, the base is your physical needs. Family, we are about to have the rug snatched off from under us by 2053. What the heck do we look like still having these aspirational goals that don't comport with the reality of what it is to be ADOS in the United States of America? Why do we still embrace displacement, right? Taking our outrage, our anger, our just anger at an unjust society, an unjust system that has chosen to keep us being the garbage eating bottom feeders, and direct it at the source, at the government, at the systems, at the institutions of the United States of America that continues to re-enslave us from generation to generation. And instead, we point that anger and that outrage at other ADOS folk. Why do we still create rationalizations? Why are we the first ones to accept whole cloth any explanation given by the pale stream media as for anything that happens to ADOS people or affects ADOS people. Why is it that we still depend on them to tell us the reality of our existence? You can lie to me about a news story, but you can't lie to me about my life. But we still, through the defense mechanism of rationalization, right? We still allow America to gaslight us en masse. No, no, you ADOS people got it all wrong. It's not that bad. We're post racial now. We had a black president. Everything's going to be okay. That's me turning up the gas on the gas light for you. And most importantly, we still see a lot of these ersatz social comparisons as valid. Although any person who is intellectually honest would know that those social comparisons have long been invalid. They have never had any validity. So there's my contribution to the answer as to why it is that the hardest ones to convince in this fight, this transformational moment as ADOS folk to fight for our due are going to be our fellow ADOS folk. Family, if you have a comment, if you have something you want to say, numbers right there, or right there, there we go. Right there. 425-296-1980. One call at a time. Make sure if you have me turned up, turn me down in the background. We want to preserve the quality and make sure everybody can hear you, right? But I want to hear from you. This is your opportunity to have a dialogue. By the way, I want to shout out Miss Denny and Money Love for the tips. I appreciate y'all. Thank y'all so much for the support, family. I'm not gonna sit here and browbeat you and beg you for bread, but if I provided something that edifies, something that uplifts, please support your interest, right? Click one of the links in the chat. You can give as little as a buck. Again, it's not the amount, it's the love that counts, right? But if you have it, share it. All right. Anybody want to give me a call? 425-296-1980 is the number. Right? Let's discuss this thing. Let's have a discussion. You know what I found most interesting, family, about my research for that video that I showed you guys today? When I studied learned helplessness in psychology, that was a game changer for me. There have been studies done. Oh, got a call right here. Let's go ahead, family. Let's run it. All right, caller from 707. It's your man, Mark Black. What's your name, where you calling from, and what you want to talk about?
Well, hello. My name is Kizzy, and I am from Vallejo, California.
Hey, Kizzy, welcome, welcome. I'm glad to. Now you're new to the Angry Black Sheep. Am I right?
I'm new as far as well. I watch you sometimes.
Okay.
I've been on the live stream once or twice, but yes, I'm pretty new.
Gotcha. Well, I'm glad to have you as a member of the Angry Black Sheep, sister. What's on your mind?
Okay, so I kind of wrote it down a little bit because I'm not a.
Go
I
ahead,
never did
sister.
this
Do
before,
you? Well, help us. You know
okay,
what I'm saying, right? Do you, but do it with us.
okay. So this is how I feel about it thus far. It's like Black people are trying to survive, right? Having to work, having to have our kids educated or at school or babysat,
Mm-hmm.
and um, we kind of like leave our self worth behind because we are in survival mode. That's how I feel. Like we're just here surviving. So if we're just here surviving, how do we come to the realization? And we're so busy trying to feed and to have somewhere to live. How do we come to the realization that we need to we need to come together?
I
You
got
understand?
you.
Like
Yeah.
when when you're trying to survive, you're not worried about nobody else. You just worried about your family.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I feel like just watching your video, it's like we're in such a mental strain that it's hard to get out of that cloud. You know,
Yeah, I definitely feel
if
where you're
that makes
coming
sense.
from. I am fortunate, sister, in that I have myself individually gone through a lot of therapy, right? You may not know a lot about my upbringing, but I was horribly abused as a child, physically, emotionally, sexually, you name it, right? Experienced a horrible upbringing in a lot of ways, which traumatized the living hell out of me in well into my adulthood. And I knew that if I was going to survive this thing for any lengthy period of time, I needed some help. And so I've been to therapy many times. And through my experiences with therapy, sister, I've been able to kind of extrapolate sort of a group dynamic, right, from my own individual thing, right? Because, see, I'm not against you or Miss Kawami or Unsunken or any of the other people here with having your own life, right? You have your own daily concerns. You said you're in Vallejo, right, in California, right? You got
Yes.
local stuff that's
Hmm.
going on in Vallejo that don't have nothing to do with me here in the Pacific Northwest, right? So there are
Right.
issues and things that you should give a local focus to, right? Or a more close or near focus to. That being said, however, it has become patently clear to us that if our goal is survival, what we're doing is not working, right? That 2053 year, sister, that I mentioned assumes that
Hmm.
nothing changes about our current condition, right? The report that I quoted that date or that year from states that if nothing changes, meaning if America does nothing worse to us, 2053 is what we face, right? So this is assuming that even
Okay.
if they stop tomorrow, we're still humped.
Right. Where I'm coming from is okay. Let me see how to put it. Is I'm saying we're focused on our survival, not trying to be um, selfish,
Mm-hmm.
but okay, just like you said, you didn't go to school. You went to some college. I had some college too. Nowhere in college or nowhere in my lower educational upbringing did I know they told us anything about our history. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yep.
So so if you go out from your education, whatever it may be, and you don't even you and nowhere in your upbringing from schooling have you saw yourself as a hero, as a this, as an inventor, as anything other than a worker. When you get into the world of working, that is what you do.
Right.
So it's what I'm saying is how my awareness came from myself. It didn't come from my mother. It didn't come from my father. No one was saying, be about black people. It's not just what they taught you in school.
Right.
So I feel like we have a lot of ADOS walking around like zombies. And so until they become aware, how do we can't come together until they are aware.
So, Kizzy, I absolutely agree with you. And right, so being a person who's very solution oriented, right? One of the things I would like to suggest is doing what we're doing now, right? There are platforms nowadays. We are all very lucky to live in the times in which we live. I mean, can you imagine what it would have been like for Nat Turner if he had Twitter? right? You know what I'm saying? Like if
Right.
MLK had Facebook and so on and so forth, you feel me? Right? So we live in a time
Yeah.
when communication between ADOS folk is as broad as it has ever been. Right now, I would argue that we have
Hmm.
essentially squandered this opportunity. When you look
Hmm.
at what we tend to put our eyes and minds on, it usually encompasses two things. Either some way we think is going to help us to get the bag individually, right? So we'll watch
Right. Right.
videos if it's talking about how to start a business or how to buy
Hmm.
shares of stock in Nike, right? This is why people like Dr. Boyce Watkins is still as popular as he is in spite of all the data, right? Because what he
Right.
does plays right into a lot of the aspirations that we have for this survival mode that we're in, right? And another thing that we tend to focus on is entertainment. As you said, it is a psychic drain on the daily just to live an ADOS life in this country, right? So for many
Hmm.
of us, the last damn thing we want is to have someone remind us of the reality of our existence and exhort us to action. We simply want to tune it out. I believe the brother in the chat mentioned sports for brothers. You got brothers that can
Right. Right.
quote box scores and knockouts and TKOs for their favorite boxer and so on and so forth. But when you ask them about the latest report from the Federal Reserve, they can't tell you nothing. And this is something that
Mm.
directly affects their lives, their everyday life, right? So, sister, doing what we're doing now is going to be, in my opinion, a great solution. We have to offer the information out there and encourage people to spend a little bit of time taking it in, right? We have to be a little bit entertaining, but we also have to bring the real hard facts. And we have to make a commitment individually as well as a collective to the truth. We have to be married to the truth. Like people say, oh, Donald Trump's a racist, so I don't trust nothing he say. Well, what if he tells the truth? You feel me? Like
You
you
wouldn't know.
right, you wouldn't know because you have discounted the possibility of him ever telling you anything that could be of value right out of the gate. You see what I'm saying? So we have to be married to the truth. We don't have any permanent friends or alliances. All we have as ADOS people are permanent interests. And we need to do and be a part of and learn the things that foster those interests. And we can do it, but we have to commit to it. Sister, I'm gonna let you have the last word. Was there anything else you wanted to say?
Well, I'm also myself, learning and becoming more aware. And do you have any like tips on where I should look to, gather more information?
Oh, most definitely, most definitely. And I'm glad you asked that question. Very important question. Where do I get the data? First of all, sister, I don't know if you know it, but in the description of all of my videos, there are links to actual free reports that you can download, such as the latest report done in Miami that discusses the status of ADOS people in Miami relative to other immigrant groups. There's also the report that Antonio Moore, aka Tone Talks, collaborated with Dr.
Mm-hmm.
Darity and other economists on what we get wrong about the racial wealth gap. That's 67 pages of pure, unadulterated fire. Like that report alone will provide you with so
Hmm.
much ammunition that you need to be an effective proponent and advocate for your justice claim. I also have links in the description field to some books that you can purchase. A couple of books that I recommend right off the gate, or right out the gate, is The Half Has Never Been Told. That is a wonderful, as far as the story of slavery can be considered wonderful, right? But it is a wonderful breakdown of the actual real truth of just how much slavery benefited the United States, how slavery built the United States. No one's put it better than the author of The Half Has Never Been Told. And a link to that book is in the description. There's also a book
Mm,
that I'm going to actually be suggesting that we read because I want to kind of start a book club. Um, this one is written by Marissa Baradaran and it's called The Color of Money, right? She's a
mhm.
banking scholar who studied how America has used the idea of black capitalism and black banking to actually subvert any possible economic growth of black folk specifically. So those are just a couple of things to get you started, but any resources I run across, I put them in the description field. So make sure you check the videos out,
Awesome. Yeah.
the description field of every video cuz I
Mhm.
always popping in something new.
That's great. Yeah, it's like I needed something, because I know about solidarity and I've read some things, but not fully. And I really need to go in depth. And because just like you said, I need to be, or we as a people need to be committed. So that's what I'm going to do. I'll commit myself to really getting the information because if I know it, then I can spread it to somebody else.
Absolutely.
And, so what you're saying that makes because I'm always like, well, I don't know, like I'm on Twitter, but it's like I don't say a lot because I feel like I don't know enough. But the information you just gave me, that will, like, I just really need to engulf myself because if I don't, then there ain't gonna be no change, just like you said.
Absolutely. Look, your job is to become me, to become Yvette, to
Mm-hmm.
become Tone, to be an advocate for your people just like we are. That's if I can do anything to foster that, then I'm happy. I'm pleased to give you the power to become the strongest voice we can have. We need all of our voices and all of our efforts in this time of winter for us here in America. So, sister, thank you for your call. I really do appreciate it. I hope you stay a member of the Angry Black Sheep, and you are welcome to call back in anytime.
All right, thank you. I appreciate it.
You got it. Have a great one.
Have a good rest of the.
I will.
You
Thank you,
too.
sister.
Thank you.
Bye bye. Family, great call from the sister, man. See, yeah, this is what it's all about, fam. It's about each of us arming ourselves with the tools and the ammunition needed to go from this survival mode that we've been stuck in for 400 years and to start to actually build the base of the pyramid needed for us to lift up, to aim upward, right? So thank you, sister, for your call. I really do appreciate you. The line is open, fam. So if anybody else have any comments, anything else they want to mention, they want to discuss this further, they have a question for me, drop me a line. Drop me a call. I'm definitely here to have a discussion. Yeah, Zulu said that they bury their heads in the sand. I mean, fam, we do so much as ADOS folk to try to avoid the reality of our existence. It's it would be not quite as bad if it was just a matter of ignorance, right? But sometimes it's willful ignorance, right? Sometimes we go out of our way to avoid the truth of the reality of where we stand here in the United States of America. And I got to tell you, fam, that as time progresses, that's got to pass away. That's got to be left behind, right? Entertainment is great. I'm all for it. I'm a gamer. I'm a geek. I'm a nerd myself, right? I love tech, love all sorts of stuff, right? But at the end of the day, fam, we got to have our due to be able to indulge in those things, right? To be able to have a normal American existence as anyone else. Unsunken, when you mentioned about the Big Brother white supremacy reveal, I didn't know what you were talking about there. If you want to elaborate in the chat or drop me a line, I'd love to hear more. Brother Tazabai is in the house. Welcome. Welcome to the broadcast and happy hump day to you, sir. Family, the line is open 425-296-1980 to get in on the conversation. I'm debating, family, by the way, on what to discuss on this next sucker free Saturday. I'm kind of thinking about doing something fun or entertaining. Like I said, I mentioned that I'm a huge fan of Game of Thrones, or at least I was until this last season, but I never really talked about it or whatever the case may be. If you'd be interested, in hearing my take on the series itself, on this last season or whatever, shoot me an email at Black Outcast Media, that's Outcast with a K, at gmail.com, or jump on my Discord. It's still open, although I'm hardly on it, right? But there's a link to my Discord there in the description field of the video. You could join us there as well, if you're interested in maybe me doing something like that. But family, I think I'm going to go ahead and wrap it up. I'm going to wait a minute or so just to see if anyone else is going to give us a call. But again, family, we have to understand that the idea that it is going to be us that hurts us has to go away. Sure, ADOS people are no different than any other people in that sometimes we may hurt each other. But our greater fight is not with each other, right? Show enough, welcome, welcome. And yeah, man, I figured that's what you was doing, so I'm glad to have you. Um, Family, our greatest fight is going to be with Uncle Sam and his propaganda machine, the media machine, people like Joy Reid, um, you know, and so on and so forth, right? I mean, at the end of the day, that's who our fight is with, not with each other, right? We have been forced in a lot of ways to commit really bad wrongs to each other, but understand we've been forced to do it, right? And let us start issuing some blanket pardons to our own people, right? I recently saw an article in Business Insider where they claimed that MLK, the FBI supposedly had audio recordings of MLK having like extramarital affairs with 40 women and was a part of a rape and so on and so forth. Now, I'm just going to say this. For any of you who weren't aware that MLK was one of the most hated people in the United States when he was alive, let me share with you. He was. Even other ADOS folk didn't like him, right? So if the federal government had the means to completely shuffle him right off the chessboard, to completely discredit this man, you don't think they would have done that? You don't think J. Edgar Hoover of COINTELPRO fame, the same J. Edgar Hoover that was behind the plot to initiate combat between the US movement and the Black Panther Party for self-defense, sending bogus letters between the leadership of both groups? You don't think that same FBI wouldn't have had a problem completely decimating the character while he was alive, by the way, of MLK, had they had the information they claim to have about this man? But on top of that, why do we care? Like, who said that MLK was some paragon of virtue? White folks try to hold him up as some sort of saint or whatever the case may be. MLK was a man who traveled a lot, not justifying his behavior, but if he did get it in on the side, how does that do anything about his advocacy? What does that say about his advocacy? Nothing. What does that have to do with anything he fought and stood for? Nothing. Just my 2 cents. 425-296-1980, family. Before I wrap it up, here's your chance to get in on the discussion. Yeah, producers, absolute filth. I mean, J. Edgar Hoover's cross dressing self got the nerve to try to talk about the sexual peccadillos and proclivities of somebody else. Please. Well, family, I'm going to go ahead and wrap it up. Thank you again for another dope broadcast. I look forward to hearing more of your voices in the future. Remember, that number is there for you to have a say. I don't want this to be a one-way discussion. I want us to have a conversation. So make sure that if you get the opportunity to call in, you do so. But with that said, be ready for your sucker free Saturday, fam. I might drop a broadcast in between if something strikes my fancy. You know me, I'm liable to talk about just about anything. By the way, thank you to all of you who have been giving our newest correspondent, Miss Denny, so much love. I recognize that some of her work has been rather incendiary to some of you, right? Especially those of you who are not used to hearing full throated, full bore support for the ADOS male. But this is Black Outcast Media, a home for the voiceless to have a voice. And unfortunately, in this day and time, our sisters have voices in media outlets all over the place. Our brothers do not. And so here we will speak about the interests of ADOS men, some of which might be incendiary, some of which may offend you. But I will squelch no voice here when it comes to the defense, the protection of black men and black boys, the two most endangered species or endangered group of people in the United States of America today, right? So I'm glad to have a voice like our sister, our beloved sister and ally, Miss Denny, speaking on some honey badger type shit, right? So thank you to all of you who are supporting her. Keep hitting those thumbs. She loves it. She reads every comment, right? So keep letting her know what you think about her content, whether for good or for ill. And until the next time I see you all, family, as always, I want to wish you all love, peace, prosperity, and power. Real power to our people.